On today's show, we're still taking a look back at game one between the Cavs and the Miami Heat, and we're going to take a little bit of a look ahead at the rest of the series. And there's no better person to do that with than with John Fanta of Fox Sports and Field of 68. He joins Locked On Cavs on today's edition of the show.
You are Locked On Cavs, your daily Cleveland Cavaliers podcast.
Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everyone? My name is Danny Cunningham. You might know me from my time covering the Cleveland Cavaliers, places like my Substack, The Inside Shot, Cleveland Magazine, 92.3 The Fan, and a number of other stops along the way. I want to say thank you to you for making Locked On Cavs your first listen today, and every day you can find the show anywhere you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, anywhere else. Drop us a 5-star rating, leave us a nice review, be a friend, tell a friend about Locked On Cavs, make sure you're subscribed, make sure a friend is subscribed as well. And if you're watching the show on YouTube, do me a favor, hit that thumbs up button for me, click subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss the latest Locked On Cavs content, a proud part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. In today's episode, brought to you by FanDuel, because right now, new FanDuel customers can get $250 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. It's $250 in bonus bets with FanDuel when your first $5 bet wins. John Fanta, friend of the show, native Clevelander, voice of college basketball on Fox Sports. Of course, you might know him from Field of 68 as well, and just a bunch of things that he's doing. Truly one of, I know not one of the voices of the NBA, but one of the voices of the sport of basketball. And just really great to catch up with him, talk about what we saw from the Cavs in game one against Miami, kind of talk about Ty Jerome, Darius Garland, Donovan Mitchell, what the Cavs did defensively, and how we think that this can move forward throughout this series. Thought this was an awesome conversation that we've had. Thrilled to have John on the show. He's certainly become a really good friend of mine over the course of this season, as I've gotten to know him better, and just could not be happier to get some Cavs takes off with him in this time between game one against Miami and game two against Miami. So one more programming note before we get to it. Tomorrow's episode going to be a crossover episode scheduled to catch up with Wes Goldberg, who you might know if you have listened to the show all year. He's been on several times when the Cavs have faced the Heat this year. I think Wes is one of the best out there. So we're going to catch up tomorrow, talk about what game two could look like, really what the rest of the series could look like, and just kind of what we think could change. But as I get to this conversation with John, make sure you hit that thumbs up button for me, click subscribe, and hit that notification bell, because I don't want you to miss any Locked On Cavs content that comes your way. I'll stop talking, but here's my conversation with John Fanta. Cleveland's own John Fanta. You know him from being essentially one of the voices of college basketball, Field of 68, Fox Sports, does a little bit of everything, and of course from Cleveland. So you know he's got plenty of takes on the Cleveland Cavaliers. We were talking the morning after the Cavs beat the Miami Heat 121-100 in game one of the first round. And John, I know that you and I have texted about this. We've talked off air about this, wanted to bring this conversation to headphones or a computer screen near you. But the thing to me that stood out right away from game one on Sunday night between the Cavs and the Heat was what the Cavs did defensively at the start of that game, the way that they just seemed to be locked in a way that we had not seen them lately. I thought it started on the perimeter, but I just kind of want to start with what your thoughts are on what the Cavs did on the defensive end of the floor against Miami.
Danny, it's great to be with you, and you're right. For 3 to 5 minute segments throughout that game, I would say there were probably 3 or 4 of them that determined how the game ended up, which ended up being a commanding Cavaliers win. I know that Miami got within 6, but it never felt like they were going to get to that point in the game. The Cavs shut down Miami offensively for portions in this game where they really guarded. And the guys who you question, primarily Darius Garland. I'm going to give Darius Garland his flowers. Now, you could say it's one game of round one in the playoffs, but this is what we have to go off of. If you wanted to see the byproduct of hiring Kenny Atkinson, we saw it in this game one. This team did not come out tight. They came out loose. They came ready to play. Rust, none of that. And Darius Garland was not going to be pushed around. He had a sequence in the second half, this has gone all over X, of him diving for a pass, an entry pass. Who was the player that they were trying to go to?
They were trying to get it to Bam Adebayo. I know exactly the play you're
Yeah.
talking about. They were trying to get it to Bam Adebayo, and there were a couple of instances. One where Garland was switched on to Khalil Ware, and he tried to sprint off of him, and Mobley did a fantastic job covering for Garland and tipping the ball out of bounds. But there was the other one where Bam Adebayo had Garland is not pinned in the post. I want to give Garland more credit for that. Like, he just didn't give up. But he fought so hard to get a hand on the basketball, and it ended up forcing a turnover in a spot where if Bam Adebayo has Darius Garland in that spot, with how good of a player Bam is, John, you feel like 9 times out of 10, Bam's going to not only be able to get that pass, but he's going to score. And Darius is just like, no, that's not happening right now.
And that's the evolution of this franchise right there from the last year. There were plays made in that game. Danny, how many times in the postseason the last 2 years were the Cavaliers in rhythm, playing pretty well, and then one bad sequence turns into multiple bad sequences, and now they've lost their handle on the steering wheel, and this is going south when you're sitting there saying, why? How? How do you get down to the magic, and you need to find a way to win a game 7? Now, there were also issues on the offensive end of the floor with J.B. Bickerstaff's offense, which unfortunately the Detroit Pistons learned the hard way at Madison Square Garden on Saturday night when they were well in control. But it's one thing to talk toughness. Like, I felt like the Cavs last year, particularly, and the year before against the Knicks, but I kind of gave them a pass in that moment. Like, all right, you learn some things here, and you go forward and you adapt, and let's see how you've grown. But like, they beat the Magic in that series, but they didn't do it on their terms. They had to play the Magic way for a good portion of that series, and then eventually their individual stars were too much. Last night, Miami's well coached. They're methodical. This is a good series for the Cavs. It is. Like, I think the Cavs could lose a game in South Beach. And am I going to panic or be alarmed? No. I think this series goes 5. If you're asking me, just because I respect Eric Spoelstra. It's nothing against the Cavs. But what I liked about the effort Sunday night, Danny, was that I didn't even think that the offense tapped into its full potential in this game. Evan Mobley hasn't even gotten going yet. And he needs to look in the mirror and realize, Evan, you are one of the biggest matchup nightmares in the NBA when you're on offense, my friend. When he let that 3 fly early, though, that 3 early in the game, Danny, that's just not a shot that he's taking with that much confidence the prior 2 years.
100%.
We saw the evolution of both confidence and toughness. And this is for a deeper dive, and I'm sure you've explored this. But all I could think about was at the end of last year when the season ended, and you could just tell not everybody in that locker room was on the same page at that point. JB was great for a certain ascendance. When they hire Kenny, we're all saying, is a hiring of a head coach going to answer every problem? Well, I'll tell you what. When you start the postseason that way, with your body language, with your mentality, with the way you defended a well-coached Miami team that doesn't make a ton of mistakes, that was the best indication that the Cleveland Cavaliers have the coach of the year in this league.
Today's show brought to you by FanDuel. The NBA playoffs are finally here. Feels like we can all take a deep breath at this. The time of year that we've been looking forward to the most has finally arrived. And there's no better way to bring in this wonderful, magical season than with FanDuel Sportsbook. Because right now, new customers with FanDuel are getting an incredible way in on the action. That incredible way, if your first $5 bet with FanDuel hits, you get $250 in bonus bets. That's right, $250 with bonus bets when you join FanDuel and place your first $5 bet if that bet wins. Maybe you're going to bet on the Cavs to win the series. You're not going to get great odds. You're going to be right, and you will get the $250 in bonus bets, but you're not going to get great odds on that because the Cavs are such heavy favorites. What you might want to do is you can select the correct series score. Now, I personally think the Cavs are going to win this series in 5 games. That means they would win this series 4-1. You get much better odds. You get those odds at plus money with FanDuel Sportsbook. That is where I think the real value is. So head on over to FanDuelSportsbook.com today FanDuel.com, FanDuel.com. Claim your $250 in bonus bets. Again, place that first $5 bet. That first $5 bet wins. $250 in bonus bets are yours with FanDuel. FanDuel is, of course, America's #1 sportsbook. The app is great. The website is even better. FanDuel.com, everything that you need. Head on over, FanDuel.com, or again, download the FanDuel Sportsbook app today. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Today's show is also brought to you by Epicor. Every team knows the value of hard work, of taking pride in what you build and practicing every detail to get the best results. But no one player, no matter how amazing, can do it all alone. Working together makes getting the win easier. And at Epicor, the All-Stars are the hardworking manufacturers and distributors who create and deliver the things that we all need, from aerospace to electrical to medical devices. Epicor ERP solutions are created by industry experts to help make every day easier. Seeing your whole supply chain is easier. Managing logistics is easier. Responding to price changes is easier. From small businesses with big dreams to growing enterprises with a global vision, Epicor will equip you with the right tools to move forward, think ahead, and lead the way. Because as the clock ticks down, you need to make the most out of every hardworking minute. Easier doesn't cut corners. Easier takes the lead. Discover your success at easierwithepicor.com. That is easierwithepicor.com. I'm glad you brought up the coaching aspect, because you posted something on social media during the game that I wanted to bring up, and I want to read this. And if you're watching on YouTube, you can see it right now. But you tweeted, Eric Spoelstra just needs a ticket to the tournament. Heat aren't as talented as the majority of these playoff teams, but they're as well coached as anybody. And I don't know the exact point in the game you put that out, but Spoelstra and Miami is known for what defensively? They play more zone defense than anybody.
When they got within 6.
They did that near the end of the third quarter, and they go on a very quick 5-0 run. They got a basket near the rim. Duncan Robinson hit a 3, and Kenny Atkinson immediately calls a timeout. And it was one of those moments where it's like, okay, Kenny understands the significance of right now. Like, he gets what this means. He knows that he needs to immediately say, okay, this is what's going on. This is how we're going to handle this. And then, they didn't necessarily finish the third quarter the right way, but then in the fourth quarter, he comes out with a lineup that forces Miami to go away from the zone, where he has 4 shooters on the floor. He takes Isaac Okoro off the floor, who did not have a very good offensive game, and he forced Miami to go away from the thing that they're best at, and that's when the Cavs were able to pull away. And yes, we'll talk about Ty Jerome. We'll talk about what Donovan Mitchell did offensively, Darius Garland, all of that. But I thought the coaching from Kenny Atkinson was a really good thing in this game. And I do think too, and I mentioned this earlier on Monday on 92.3 when I was on with Ken Carmen in the morning, and I think that Spo is the best coach in the Eastern Conference, maybe the best coach in all of basketball. That's a different discussion for a different day. But I don't think that there are many coaches in the East that are better than Kenny Atkinson. Like, I just don't know that there are many teams the Cavs could match up and say, you know what, the Cavs don't have a coaching advantage in this series. Miami is one of them. And I think that is going to be something that forces this Cavs team to grow. And I think it's going to make Kenny Atkinson so much better, not only by the time this series ends, but as the playoffs roll on. And I'm with you. I picked Cavs in 5. I've not changed off of that. But I do think the thing I feel differently about after game 1 is I think this series is going to help the Cavs in more ways than I maybe realized when they get through it.
Game pressure is a good thing. And when you can face it, early on, it should help you later. I thought it helped Boston a lot. Like Boston, what they did to the Pacers last year, look how many close games there were. And look, the Cavs gave them a test or two, and one of them was in Cleveland, another in Boston, and they were right there. And, Boston handled those things well, and that's what led them to winning the title. But you've got to accumulate that. It's important. I'm sorry. Like, I think the Thunder showed everybody in the league that they're the best team in the West, and they asserted that. And we lead with other teams because we know that the eyeballs and the branding and the brand that the Lakers and the Warriors carry nationally, although that got stuffed into a locker in LA on Saturday night. Like that's what's interesting about the NBA is like, you're the same way. I appreciate watching great basketball, and you can't, but Oklahoma City, when they do face the first type of game pressure in this postseason, how do they handle it? Because it's going to come. If it happens, if it doesn't happen in this series, it's absolutely coming in the next round.
Yes.
And the Clippers or Nuggets, and I still think my gut still says it's going to be the Clippers. But whoever that is will have faced a ton of game pressure. But here's my other point about the Cavs and the way that they won this game. It wasn't just the same old formula. They have, by the way, like 10, 15, 20 different ways that they could win a game. That's what I love about this team. That's why they could win it all. Again, they weren't at their, it's not like the front court was doing a whole lot offensively last night. And for a large period of that game, Donovan Mitchell could not hit a three and still ended up with 30 points in the game. But you know who stepped up last night? Not just Ty Jerome. I thought the floor game of Sam Merrill was really good and encouraging, especially on a night, Danny, where Isaac Okoro showed that, there's a reason why teams are playing you that way. And maybe there's an adjustment there. Maybe that's a coaching thing. But, I am watching the game and I'm like, all right, Jerome, this is fantastic. Who else off the bench is going to provide some sparks? Didn't necessarily do it from just a shooting column either. He wasn't always making shots. You tweeted this during the game. I thought Merrill, and somebody put out this stat that whoever he was guarding in one-on-one scenarios, he held them to 3 of 10 last night.
Right.
Sam Merrill performed.
I thought he was awesome. And the box score didn't do it justice. He made 2 threes. He had 6 points. He also had 4 assists. To me, watching him, what he did defensively, and I do think that he gets a bad rap as a defender. Is he an all-defense caliber guy? No, he's never going to be that. But he always knows where to be. He moves his feet. He's a better defender than I think he's given credit for. And we've heard Kenny Atkinson all year long. I would ask a question about Sam on the offensive end or about his offensive gravity throughout the regular season. And Kenny immediately just talks about what Sam provides to them defensively as no, that's actually why he's on the floor. And he does do all those things offensively, but defensively, he was really good in this game. I thought that his decision-making was exactly what it needed to be, because I do think when you're in the role that Sam is in, when everybody knows what he's on the floor to do, right? He is on the floor offensively to take and make 3-pointers. I think it can be really easy. And we've seen this with Sam, not just this year, but throughout his career. His shot diet consists of a lot of really challenging looks from beyond the arc. He's a movement shooter. He takes a lot of shots with a hand on his face. It's a really difficult way to live. And I do think that can lead to maybe forcing some things, especially when your playing time might be limited in the way that it is for Sam. I thought that his decision-making was awesome. I thought he knew when to shoot. The fact that he had 4 assists and no turnovers, I thought was a really good thing. I thought he competed really, really hard defensively. He's somebody that I look at and say, yeah, that guy. And I know there were questions from a certain portion of the fan base about whether Sam could play in a postseason series, whether or not teams would try and play him off the floor. I think on Sunday, he did a really good job of answering that and saying, no, he belongs in this series. Now, will it be like that the whole time throughout the playoffs? I don't know, but he has a spot in this series, I think, pretty solidly.
Absolutely. And he took it personally on the defensive end of the floor with how hard he played. And that reverberated across the roster. I think that these guys have heard. I don't know if you were in the building, but Dennis Scott of Turner did a report early in the broadcast in the midst of some audio issues that they were having elsewhere.
I heard.
But Dennis did a report saying that Kenny Atkinson talked with his team about graduating. Are you ready? Are you ready to graduate from all these things that are being discussed with us? Okay, we can't handle the playoffs. Okay, Donovan, you can't make the conference finals. Okay, they're a nice regular season story, but the postseason is a different monster. It's Boston's to lose. When you come out and you play that way collectively in the column that matters most during the playoffs, which is the column that frankly matters the least in the regular season, collecting stops. To me, one of the biggest revelation pieces in that second half on Sunday night was the way they turned the water off of Tyler Hero.
Right.
Tyler Hero goes for 17 points in the first half, Danny. And there is a thought when we get to halftime where I'm saying, well, if Bam continues to do this and Hero and Mitchell make enough shots, meaning Davion Mitchell, who, by the way, my respect for him is growing. I think that guy's making himself some cash. I mean, he's showing right now that he's a dangerous player. But if Hero keeps this up, he's had a heck of a week. Why couldn't he have them more in the game late? Well, everybody that they sent towards him defensively in that second half was guarding him and making his life difficult. But to me, when we talked last week, you asked me on 92.3 The Fan, what was the thing I'm most intrigued by? And the thing I said was, I so want Darius Garland to pan out at a high level because I think he embodies the city. Like, the game ends, Danny, he's given a fist bump to everybody around the court. The guy seems to get it at a very high level, and you see that up close. So you want that for someone who's committed and who the franchise is committed to. And I thought that last night that he really he showed something in the toughness column. There's 15 more games to win for a title, but in the here and now, that's the way you set the tone to a run.
I'm glad you brought up Garland because I think one of the most important things about that game on Sunday night was that, one, Garland had a really good game. I think that's probably, and it's not as if he's got some super big sample size of playing in the postseason. Most of it hasn't been good. I do think a lot of what happened last year can be explained by the jaw injury, but last night's already the second best playoff game that he ever had, behind game 2 against the New York Knicks a couple of years ago when he went for 30 plus and was really good in that Cavs lone win in that series. But I thought, John, that it was important that both he and Donovan Mitchell had a good game, or an excellent game if you want to go that far. I know Donovan was just 2 of 9 from 3, so he can certainly be better, but found a way to get 30 points pretty efficiently. The fact that they had good games on the same night, I think, is something that's important, because think of the second half of the season. Donovan didn't necessarily have a great second half. After Darius hurt his hip against the New York Knicks in late February, he kind of struggled the last couple of months of the season. Darius did have some good games, but those good games were against Portland. Donovan Mitchell didn't play. Against the Chicago Bulls, Donovan Mitchell didn't play. At Madison Square Garden to close out his regular season, Donovan Mitchell didn't play. Like, that's the common theme here. And those two, obviously, I do think can coexist. I think they could play excellent basketball together. And I think the fact that they did it together with, of course, Ty Jerome also having a big part off the bench, but Darius and Donovan together having a really good game on the same night to start the playoffs, I think is one of the best omens for this team moving forward.
And it's a reflection of their offense not being a square peg in a round hole.
Yes.
So they're the best offense in the league. They are. I mean, the numbers back it up. They had historic offensive rates. Their efficiency rate was the best we had seen. And that's a reflection of the way that the game has shifted and the sport has shifted. But still, this team has not felt the way that they did last night in the postseason the last 2 years because of the way that the pieces mix and match. And they're a lot of the same pieces. So one of the things that I loved was that Kenny Atkinson didn't play anybody more than 33 minutes. Now,
right.
Could that change? Yeah, but what's the number one component of this first round? Who gets the most rest? Who comes out of it with the most rest? Like, whoever wins the Clippers-Nuggets series is going to feel it. Feel it. I mean, they just are. Pacers-Bucks could end up being a similar way, although Indiana looked great on Saturday. And Indiana, not to look ahead, but they're not going to be an easy out if they are, in fact, a second-round opponent because they play the right way, and they play team basketball, and they defend at a high level, and Rick Carlisle gets the most out of them. But I just thought, I'm with you, and I thought that Garland didn't force the issue on anything. He just was present. He had 5 assists. He was burying threes. He buried a 3 in the fourth quarter off a scramble, and he hustled. He got to the ball a couple times for loose balls. Like, it was an encouraging performance. And I think if you had one thing that I would look at, I would look at, like, okay, and I'm sure those guys are going to get back in the lab, but your front court, those guys are probably looking at each other today and saying, hey, the guards picked it up in game 1. And I think Kenny will look at that too. Okay, how do I get Evan Mobley going? How do I better get him going? But look, we're nitpicking. Not everything's going to be perfect at game one, but we're talking about a team that's trying to contend for a championship here. And I think, Danny, like, you cover this team daily, but you know this. In the postseason, now there's a lot of new eyeballs that are tuning in and a lot of people now talking about the team. And I was getting texts from people who had not watched much all season. And I watch as much as I can. Obviously, I do a lot in the college game, but I do watch a fair amount. But I'm getting texts from people being like, man, they've really got a shot here to do that. I'm like, yeah. Like, yes, this team is good enough to do all the things that you think about. And this is what leads us to Danny Cunningham. What a luxury to have Ty Jerome on your basketball team.
John, the thing about that too, part of it was, okay, Ty's been awesome all year, right? Like, he has stepped up. He's been really good in games that Darius or Donovan didn't play. And they'll give those guys credit. They both played in a lot of games this year. They didn't miss much time at all. And most of the time that they did miss was for a little just tiny maintenance thing or rest. But it felt like every time one of those guys was out, Ty stepped up and had a really big game. And it never for him felt like the moment was too big. But the fact that Sunday night was the first ever playoff game that he played in, I expected him to be good. I don't think it was some surprise that he fit in. I didn't expect him to score 28 points. I didn't expect him to take over the fourth quarter, where he had 16 of his 28 in the fourth quarter. And, Miami is a team that's not going to lay down. They're going to play a full 48-minute game. They're going to push the Cavs in certain ways, but he was the reason why they were able to pull away. And some of the shots that he was hitting, the fact that he was, I know we mentioned Tyler Hero already, but like, he outplayed Tyler Hero so significantly down the stretch of that game. It is such a luxury to have him. And when I do think it's a little unfair to look back at last year and say, the Cavs are the same group. Obviously, they've made a trade since then with the DeAndre Hunter acquisition during the season. But the biggest difference between this team this year and last year is Evan Mobley's better. Kenny Atkinson's here. But Ty Jerome coming out of nowhere. And Kobe Altman said prior to the season, this was at his pre-training camp availability, he and Kenny Atkinson spoke the Friday before training camp started. And he said, Ty Jerome has been the MVP of September. And it was one of those comments that you hear from an executive that's just like, okay, man, like, it was a sort of a comment you wanted to roll your eyes at, because it's like, what is this guy? He played 15 minutes last year. He had a really bad ankle injury. He was kind of borderline not being in the NBA before the Cavs signed him. The MVP of September on a team that has Donovan Mitchell and Darius Garland and Evan Mobley and Jarrett Allen and Max Strus. But this guy is the MVP of September. And I don't think Kobe Altman will ever be more right about anything than what he said about Ty Jerome. And I think, we're going to see more of him in the playoffs, obviously. And I don't want to say that he's vindicated because he did what he did last night, but it's been an incredible season for Ty. And I thought it was so fitting that in his first ever playoff game, he goes out and plays as well as he did against Miami.
How quickly did you go from that September statement kind of blowing smoke to, wait a minute, because it's not just a one-off, but during the regular season, okay, maybe he had a point. Oh, wait a minute, he did have a point.
So for me, it was earlier in the season, because he kind of like the 15-game winning streak, there was so much to flesh out a little bit, just like, oh, they're winning all of these games and everything was going well. And it's like, okay, at some point, the other shoe's going to drop, not for any individual player, but they're going to lose a game at some point. And I think for me, it may have been during that Warriors game where the Cavs played, I think, the best half of basketball they had, like any team maybe has ever played, where they were beating the Warriors by 41 points at halftime. And Ty had 20 points in that game. And it's not as if he just racked up points in garbage time. Like, no, he was a big reason why they were leading as large as they were. And then it was also the final game. It was the 15th win, where I don't believe Darius Garland played. And Ty went out and had 24 points in that game. And Boston was right around the corner. Everyone was looking ahead to that showdown. Or maybe Donovan Mitchell didn't play in that game. I think that was the first game Donovan didn't play. And Ty had 24. And it's like, oh, this might be real. And then he goes through a bit of a slump in the month of December. The calendar flips to January and he turns it right back on. It's just like, oh, this guy is actually for real. He is actually a good NBA player. This isn't just a fun story anymore. What about you? When did you become a Ty Jerome believer, John?
I would say when I'm watching him, when the calendar turns to January and February, and now we're getting into the thick of the season, and this guy is putting up some really steady numbers, but just proving, one, that he belongs. Two, I think role allocation on these top teams, Danny, is what can lead them to championships. And yeah, Ty had an otherworldly night. Like, that's not going to happen every single night, but you can tell how liked he is across that roster. All you have to see is Donovan's body language and Darius's body language around him. But if you look at it, he had a stretch there to close January where he goes for 33 at Philly. He goes for a couple of 20-point performances at Miami, against Atlanta. Then the calendar turns to February, and this is a guy who was scoring steadily in double figures. I mean, he scored 13 plus 6 times in 8 games. And, he's doing it anywhere from 18 to 25 minutes, but he's just playing a steady role. And he's just understanding what he has to do. And he wasn't always shooting the ball well. But what do you say, Danny, when you're in a position and you're not delivering offensively, are you then a liability defensively, or do you at least hang in? And I think that he's figured out, like, what do I have to do to stay on the court? What do I have to do to add value to this team? But you're right. Like, this is one of the best stories now in the playoffs right off the bat, because this is a guy who wins a national championship at Virginia. Remember, he was on the team that was the first 1 seed to ever lose to a 16 seed in the NCAA tournament, UMBC.
Right.
That humbles you. It also makes you experience literally the worst thing you could as a college basketball player in terms of the 180 of that. You start your career in Phoenix. I remember talking to people around the Virginia staff. They're like, look, this guy's a New York guy. He's from New Rochelle. He went to Iona Prep. And, that's an area of tough kids. And he ends up in Northern Arizona for some time. He ends up with the Oklahoma City Blue for some time. He's spread his career across 4 NBA organizations in 6 years. He knows the fight. And when you know the fight, that's who you want on your team as supplemental players. You want guys who get it. And that guy gets it. And that's why you heard him last night. He's like, I love this atmosphere. I love this organization. Like that's really smart. And it's a credit to Kobe Altman that he saw it before virtually anybody else did and proclaimed it to the degree that he did. But I don't think he even could have seen. Who could have seen that last night? I mean, there was unbelievable.
Nobody. I mean, I have talked with members of the organization and ones that we're talking about how good Ty was before the season started, the preseason, the training camp, all that stuff. It's just like, Ty never, like, he was just good, and everyone sort of expected not for him to not be good anymore, but at some point there's going to be a little bit of a drop off, and it never came. Like, just every day that he showed up, he was just as good or better than he was the day before. That said, I think they would all admit, like, if you talk to somebody that works in the Cavs front office, I think they all kind of admit, hey, we thought Ty was going to be good. We saw a lot of signs. I don't think that any of them would have believed you if I would have said, hey, game 1, first of all, you guys are going to win 64 games. Game 1 of the playoffs, Miami Heat coming into the arena. In the fourth quarter, they're going to be trapping Ty Jerome near half court to force the basketball out of his hands. Nobody would have believed you. But that happened, John, in a playoff game in 2025. Like, that's a real thing that happened.
With Donovan Mitchell sitting for a little bit and watching.
Yes. Like,
sitting with
no one would have believed you.
And it was, at that point, it was like a 12-point game. Like, it wasn't 3, it wasn't 5, but it also wasn't 20. They won the game by 21, which is a tad deceiving, because it was about 8 to 12 for a while. But then that's what it felt like throughout. It felt like a lot more than that. But yeah, this was, what a luxury. I mean, that shows the growth too, because And I hate to rag on the past, but I think you have to talk about the evolution of this team this year and the personnel that has also grown. It felt like the last two postseasons, certain things had to happen for the Cavs to win. When you have a Donovan Mitchell sitting in the fourth quarter of a game against a very well-coached Miami Heat team, and you're winning in convincing fashion, and a guy off the bench is scoring 28, that, yes, it's not going to happen every night, but that's a byproduct of how you play offensively, the shots you're generating offensively, the growth of your complementary pieces like a Sam Merrill, who set him up a couple times, like, of course, Ty. But it's also the fact that, Danny, the guy you brought in, DeAndre Hunter, was really a non-factor in this game. That's not a bad thing. That's more, look at it as a good thing. That's not going to happen all throughout the postseason. He could have 18 the next game. They don't need certain X's to get checked off for them to beat teams in the second round and hell, the Celtics in the conference finals. And that's what makes Boston so good, to Boston's credit. Like yesterday, it's like, Tatum and Brown aren't having a great game. That doesn't matter. Doesn't matter.
Derek White's going to score 30. That's fine.
That's what makes, in a league where during the postseason, you're judged on whether or not you get stops. To me, the barometer of how successful you end up being, like that, obviously the Cavs defense was a theme and was the top theme for both of us from game one. But you're going to face good defenses. How many different ways do you have to score the ball?
And the Cavs have a number of different ways to be able to do that. That is certainly one of the best things about them, and one of the reasons why I think we both believe that they are a true championship contender. But John, thank you so much for doing this. This was an absolute blast. We will have to do this again, maybe a couple more times as the postseason rolls along.
Consider that done. Now the wait feels like forever just to get to game 2 on Wednesday. But you know what? The Ty Jerome songs and T-shirts across town, that gives them all time to be made. Thanks, Danny.
Hope everybody enjoyed today's episode of Locked On Cavs. Big thank you to John Fanta. Make sure you check out all of his stuff. You can find him on Twitter at John_Fanta. Does a great job with everything that he does. He does a lot of stuff, a lot of college basketball stuff. Does a great job. Make sure you check him out. Make sure you also check out the Locked On Cavs daily newsletter, because right now there's some really great giveaways that you could potentially get in on. All you got to do, go to LockedOnDaily.com, subscribe to the Locked On Cavs daily newsletter. You will be entered to win a $2,500 Best Buy gift card, $300 Game Time gift card, and a $200 Fanatics gift card. Again, subscribe between now and April 30th to be automatically entered to win. That is LockedOnDaily.com, LockedOnDaily.com for more. I will be back tomorrow. Wes Goldberg is scheduled to join. We are planning on doing a crossover episode previewing the rest of the series between the Cleveland Cavaliers and the Miami Heat. So make sure you keep it locked here, wherever you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, anywhere else. Drop us a 5-star rating. Leave us a nice review. Be a friend. Tell a friend about Locked On Cavs. Make sure you're subscribed. Make sure a friend is subscribed as well. And if you're watching on YouTube, as we get out of here, do me a favor. Hit that thumbs up button for me. Click subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss the latest Locked On Cavs content. I'll be back with more about the Cleveland Cavaliers.